Hi, I'm Rhonda Wepler. I'm an artist in residence at the Museum of Arts and Design here in New York City, and I've been making some art projects here on my dining table for the past few weeks.
I often make sculptures using everyday materials, like these sculptures of dandelions made from beer cans I found in San Francisco. This series of tutorials will show you how to use materials from your kitchen and home to make gifts that fit in a standard size envelope to mail to friends and family. This episode was inspired by this brooch in the collection of the Museum of Arts and Design. Shaped like a dung beetle, this pin is made from a bent and cut steel spoon. Look at these nice snow shovels. Oh, it's actually a tiny spoon made of a pistachio nut shell and some recycled plastic. These make a great gift for a friend that likes recycling and eating tiny foods. Here are the materials you'll need for this project. Please pause the video here to get a closer look. First, soak some empty pistachio shells overnight to soften them. Pick a few nicely shaped shells. Hammer a small nail into the fatter end of the shell. Use cork or a cutting board for a buffer. Make a few extra shells in case some split as they dry. Pierce only so that the top of the nail drives through to avoid splitting the shell too much. Remove the nail and remelt the hole to widen with an X-Acto knife blade. You will need 2 pieces of thin wire that are about 3 inches long. You can use the wire cut from a twist tie. I am using this thin wire that I found at my apartment. It is better to let the shells completely dry before wiring them, since they will shrink again once dry, and thus might loosen the wire too much. Thread 1 wire through the hole. Fold in half and twist tightly against the shell. Use pliers to make a stiff joint. Add the second wire and twist it the same way separately. Now twist the 2 tails together. You will want to have this tail very straight. Trim the ends off to leave about an inch long handle. The plastic we will be recycling is high density polyethylene plastic, or HDPE plastic. Here's what I found in my apartment that is made of HDPE plastic. It seems to be mostly a non-shiny, non-transparent plastic. There are many interesting tutorials online of people making things using melted HDPE plastic. This project is based on what I learned from the tutorials and also seeing what I could do in a New York apartment. Make sure you only use HDPE for this project. Other plastics may be toxic to melt. HDPE plastics will have the number 2 in the triangular recycling sign, and often also have the letters HDPE on them. For this project, you will need some colorless translucent HDPE, like the type from this milk jug. I use small scissors, wire cutters, and big scissors to cut the plastics. Each tool is helpful for different thicknesses and sizes of plastic. To cut into a bottle, you first have to pierce it with a box cutter knife. Then continue with scissors. Cut the big pieces into strips. Then the strips into tiny pieces. It is better to always include some of these translucent colorless pieces as they become clear when heated, acting like a temperature gauge. Collect the pieces into bags, separating the colors, but also have a bag for a favorite festive color mix. We will be using aluminum from pop cans and clips to make a mold for the handle. The mold has a trap door that initially stands up to hold the plastic in the tray, then opens and flattens to allow the pistachio shell to embed into the plastic handle a little bit. The door can be opened in the oven with a spatula like this. To cut into a can, first pierce the box cutter knife. Then use scissors. Cut off the top and bottom of 1 can to make the material you'll need for the mold. Wear old cloth gloves so you don't cut your hands on the sharp metal. Trim any sharp shards off the edge. And roll and reverse to flatten. Cut the aluminum down to a 3-inch square size so it is more manageable. Here is a scale diagram of the mold. The pink is folding lines. Use a fine permanent marker to mark the aluminum, only on the edges so that the ink won't stain the handle eventually. The handle is slightly wedge-shaped from the end to the neck where the shell is. Measure the neck as 0.5 centimeters while the tail is wider at a 1/4 inch wide. Join the dots with a fold, using a ruler as an edge. The depth of the handle is 0.5 centimeters in order to fit inside a standard size envelope to mail. Measure this on both sides of this trough. Fold these lines in the opposite direction as the first folds. The base of the pistachio shell should just fit in the narrow neck. Trim down these side flaps to make them more manageable. To make the ends of the mold, measure a 0.5 centimeter for the back wall and 1 centimeter for the tab. Cut the sides for the back wall, but leave the bottom of the wall still attached to the trough. Here I'm cutting off the area for the tab. Remove the excess pieces. Now fold the back shut. This won't ever need to be opened again, so you can tuck it in quite tightly at the sides. Fold down the back tab. To make the trap door at the neck of the mold, do the same as the end, only leave the ends loose. Note this end will not need a tab. Trim to make sure that the sides fit. And practice opening the door and putting the pistachio nut in. For the lid of the mold, a piece of aluminum is fit over the mold bottom. Make sure it is big enough to cover all the tabs. Be sure to totally clean your table as soon as you are done, as the shards left are very small and sharp. Next, shut the trap door and fill the mold with plastic pieces as tightly as possible. The plastic shrinks as it melts, so pack it tightly, especially in the corners. Include a few pieces of the translucent, colorless pieces from milk jugs to act as a temperature gauge. Cut a top piece of milk jug type plastic that totally covers the top trough and set aside. To protect your hands, use an old pair of fabric gloves. Oven mitts are too bulky for this project. Gather everything you will need and have it ready by the toaster oven. You need to be able to move quickly in and out of the oven, so I'm not sure if a conventional full-size oven would work. HDPE plastic melts at a low temperature, only 325 degrees Fahrenheit, which is less than what cookies bake at. It doesn't emit toxic fumes at this temperature, but it's tricky keeping it hot and manipulating it as it hardens within seconds of it being out of the oven at this temperature. I keep it at 325 degrees, but then lean it a bit towards 350 degrees, and try to keep the oven door closed as much as possible to keep the heat in. My toaster oven cycles through the elements being red hot and then turning off to maintain the temperature. Try to open the door only between red hot cycles to keep the heat in. Place the top and bottom of the mold in the oven. Notice that the white translucent pieces turn clear once heated. Note also that I am doing this all in the oven and not taking the tray out. This is so that the plastic doesn't cool off, as it stiffens almost immediately once out of the oven. Wrap a spatula in parchment paper to keep it from sticking to the molten plastic. Maintain a nice sharp corner to get into the corners of the mold. Squish down hard so that all the plastic squishes down. If pieces fall outside the trough, just scoop back in with a spatula. You may note that the plastic never liquefies. It will only turn into a rubbery putty type consistency. I am basically just smushing the pieces together so that they fuse and so that the air between the pieces is being squished out throughout this whole process. Once the trough is tightly packed with molten plastic, about 3/4 full, open up the trap door with the spatula. Press the shell and the wire in, embedding the shell slightly in the plastic. Place the piece of milk jug plastic over top of the trough and return to the oven. Once this plastic has turned clear, squish down. Try to squish all the pieces together so that the air comes out. Then add more colorful pieces on top. You may need to remove it from the oven to get a better look. Fill up any holes that you see and remember to add at least one translucent white piece. Melt and squish down this final layer, placing a lot of pressure. Put back in the oven and melt a bit, and add the lid. The plastic needs to melt a bit underneath in order for the lid to attach. Now squish down with all your might and return to the oven. Once that is melted, flip over. Again, squish down quite hard. HDPE plastic needs to be cast under pressure like this. It wants to shrink, so if left without pressure, it will shrink unevenly and warp and wrinkle tremendously. Part of the problem is that it cools unevenly when different parts are thicker than others, tugging on itself as it shrinks. Take it out of the oven and carefully add the metal clips on. Return to the oven for a final blast of heat. Turn off the oven after a few minutes. Cooling it slowly in the oven like this will help keep it from warping or shrinking. After it has completely cooled in the oven, you can remove the clips and take apart the mold. You can clean up these plastic edges a bit with a pair of small sharp scissors. Air pockets often occur at the end of the handle, which can be cut off with a box cutter like this. You can also permanently dye the shell using a bath of water and lots of food coloring. Let the whole spoon soak for a few days. Rinse the spoon and allow to dry. Ta-da! This little spoon will go to my friend Jenny in Dufftown, Scotland. A special thanks to Mike at Atomic Shrimp for his informative online HDPE melting tutorials documenting his attempts to make a boat out of recycled plastic.
Well, thanks for watching. Next time we're making itty bitty bowls to match our spoons. Stay safe out there.